All right, guys, so check this out. Have you ever heard of Goldbelly? Okay, so it's this amazing site where you can order the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants all across the country, and they will ship it straight to your door. That's right, these guys will ship you Philly cheesesteaks from Jim's or Pat's in Philly, buffalo wings from the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, and even Kansas City's most legendary barbecue. So, if you're looking to host an epic Super Bowl party, go to goldbelly.com and get free shipping and 20% off your first order with promo code GAMEDAY.
Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. In September of 1955, Americans woke up to a headline that felt almost unthinkable. The President of the United States, the hero of D-Day, the general who had helped win World War II, had suffered a heart attack. He survived. He returned to office. But the shockwaves of that moment traveled far beyond politics, and are actually still felt today. Because when Dwight D. Eisenhower fell ill, the country didn't just worry about its leader, it started worrying about itself. The History Brief today returns to the Conversation Series Vault and a chat with the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jonathan Eig about his book, MLK, A Life. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in Paris, a defining moment of the French Revolution that ended centuries of monarchy and shocked Europe's ruling elites. On January 21st, 1924, Vladimir Lenin died after years of declining health. His death triggered a brutal power struggle that would ultimately elevate Joseph Stalin and reshape the Soviet Union. Story of the day. By the mid-1950s, the United States was riding a wave of post-war optimism. Suburbs sprawled outward. Television sets flickered in living rooms. Convenience foods promised ease and abundance. Cigarettes were everywhere, advertised by doctors, handed out in military rations, glamorized on screen. Heart disease, meanwhile, was poorly understood. It was often seen as sudden, mysterious, and simply the price of getting older. Diets heavy in red meat, butter, eggs, and cream were not controversial. They were aspirational. Being well-fed was a sign of success after all. And no one embodied that mid-century American confidence more fully than President Dwight D. Eisenhower himself. On the night of September 23, 1955, President Eisenhower was vacationing in Denver when he complained of indigestion, a symptom many heart attack victims dismissed at the time. Doctors soon realized it was far more serious. The diagnosis was myocardial infarction. News broke the next morning, and Americans reacted with disbelief. This was not a frail man. Eisenhower was only 64. He had commanded millions of troops. He had survived the stress of global war. If he could have a heart attack, what did that mean for everyone else? For weeks, the president's condition dominated headlines. Newspapers printed daily medical bulletins. Doctors explained heart anatomy to the public. Americans learned new words, such as cholesterol, arteries, blood pressure, and health became national news. Eisenhower's recovery was slow and highly public. His doctors placed him on a strict bed rest, then carefully monitored his return to activity. He gave up cigarettes, his exercise routine was scrutinized, even his meals became a matter of public interest. For the first time, Americans watched a sitting president navigate chronic illness, not behind closed doors, but in real time. And something unexpected happened. People began to imitate him. Doctors reported patients asking whether they should stop smoking as well. Like the president. Dietitians were consulted. Newspapers published advice columns about healthy heart living. Grocery stores saw rising interest in lighter foods. Eisenhower had not intended to start a health movement, but by surviving, he did. The timing could not have been more consequential. In the early 1950s, researchers were beginning to investigate links between diet, cholesterol, and heart disease, but their work was largely confined to academic journals. Eisenhower's heart attack catapulted that science into public view. Studies like the Framingham Heart Study, already underway, suddenly gained national attention. Fat, once a symbol of prosperity, came under suspicion. Butter, eggs, red meat, staples of the American diet, were re-examined through a new lens of risk. Magazines that once celebrated indulgence now featured warnings. Advertisements pivoted as well. Low fat became a selling point. The idea that food could prevent disease, not just cause pleasure, began to take hold for the first time. What started as a medical caution soon became a cultural obsession. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Americans were increasingly urged to monitor their weight, limit fat, and manage stress, often without clear scientific consensus. Diet plans proliferated. Exercise was reframed not as leisure, but as an obligation for every person. The president's heart attack had helped legitimize a new idea, that personal discipline could ward off illness, and that failure to do so was, in some sense, personal responsibility. This shift laid the groundwork for modern diet culture. Food became moralized, bodies became indicators of character, health advice blurred into social pressure. Ironically, Eisenhower himself struggled with these expectations. He found the dietary restrictions frustrating. He disliked the loss of autonomy, but the example had already been set. There was also a political dimension to Eisenhower's illness. In the Cold War era, physical vigor was tied to national strength. If the president's heart was weak, critics at least whispered, what did that say about America? The administration worked carefully to reassure the public. Eisenhower returned to office. He ran for and won re-election in 1956. The message was clear. Illness did not mean incapacity. Yet, the underlying anxiety remained. Americans had glimpsed vulnerability at the highest level of power, and once seen, it could not be unseen. In hindsight, Eisenhower's heart attack marked a turning point. It helped launch public awareness of cardiovascular disease. It encouraged people to stop smoking, and it pushed nutrition and preventative medicine into the mainstream. But it also accelerated a culture of fear and self-surveillance, one that often raced ahead of science. Simplistic solutions replaced nuanced understanding. Fat was demonized. Later generations would inherit cycles of dieting, guilt, and conflicting advice. The roots of all that trace back, in part, to a quiet bedroom in Denver in 1955, and a president whose private medical crisis became a public reckoning. The History Brief. The following is an excerpt from a past episode of the Friday Conversation series, and a conversation with author Jonathan Eeg about his book, MLK, A Life. Search for the full episode wherever you are listening to this podcast, or go to www.historyshortspodcast.com/conversations.
Well, I think the start for me was the epiphany that Martin Luther King could have still been alive, and that there were hundreds of people alive who knew him. You know, I was working on my book about Muhammad Ali, and I was interviewing people like Dick Gregory and Andrew Young and Harry Belafonte and Jesse Jackson, and they began telling stories about Martin Luther King and the time that he met Muhammad Ali, or the two times that they met. And that's when it occurred to me that, wow, it would be really cool to just travel the country interviewing people who knew Martin Luther King and seeing what he was really like, because, you know, we've turned him into this very safe, two-dimensional figure and lost sight of his flesh and blood. And I just thought that would make an amazing project. And then it turned out there hadn't been a biography since the 80s. So we desperately needed a new King biography. And that's what got me going. And I guess what surprised me the most was just how human he was, how flawed he was, how sad he was at times, how often he felt like a failure. And he suffered from depression. He was hospitalized numerous times. He attempted suicide twice as a teenager. And then when the world started turning against him and he became unpopular and his own government was trying to destroy him, you know, he could have quit. And I think that's what amazed me too, is how he never lost faith and never lost hope. And not only did he stay in the fight, but he really doubled down on his beliefs and became more radical and more outspoken, which is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, and you mentioned faith. Just reading the book, it's almost not that you wouldn't know this, but everyone kind of almost assumes. But he was very religious. He was a very
Yeah.
religious man, and you would obviously you're like he's a reverend. Obviously, he's religious, Peter. But you get that sense that he continuously went back to that as like his core of beliefs that kind of drove him forward.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Almost like, oh, of course, you idiot. How could you not have seen that all along? He's Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. But I guess the point for me is that he truly believed and tried to live his faith, which is so rare, even for a lot of people who work as clergy. I think to really commit your life to something like that and to suffer for it and to risk your life, to know that might die for these beliefs is extraordinary. And he did it every day.
Thank you again for tuning in to listen to another episode and for making this little humble show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Or you could become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. You could do so by following a link on my website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can always email me at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of the day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.